Vagabond, one of the best mangas I've ever read, and likely the best written manga I've ever read. Vagabond adds a sense of realism I've never experienced with a manga. I've never read a manga that was so on the nose, so realistic in pretty much every single encounter. And that sounds crazy considering this is a manga where a character fights 70 men all by himself. But at no point in this manga did I ever believe what was taking place was unbelievable, that it didn't make sense, that a character was protected by plot. Everything flowed beautifully and made perfect sense. There's no overarching evil villain. There's no nefarious organization that needs quelled. At the end of the day, Vagabond is just a story about people. People with different perspectives, going through different things in life, battling with their own mental struggles. And I think it really hits home on the fact that everyone is the hero of their own story. The motivations are fully fleshed out. And despite disagreeing with some and agreeing with others, you can understand the mentality behind pretty much every decision made in the series. That spans from main characters all the way up to old grannies that are on screen for minimal amount of time. One of the most impressive things to me is that one of the main characters of the story is a character that doesn't even have a line of dialogue. He's deaf, he's mute, and yet everything is still so accurately conveyed through action and expression. The lessons, the tribulations that all the characters face in this story are inspiring to read because it doesn't feel like this is some elseworld fantasy plotline. Of course, it is still rooted in fiction despite the fact that it is based on historical events, and maybe the fact that it is based on historical events has some influence on its realism. This story feels like you can really apply the things that you learn from reading to your life. That's a big part of manga and anime, where there's a lot of messages that you can take, but I think Vagabond really takes it to the next level. One of the aspects I really like is that characters in the story don't feel invincible, despite the fact that one of the big calling cards of this manga is the desire to be invincible under the sun, the one under the sun. Yet, when characters are injured, they don't miraculously heal. They feel the effects, and it takes a considerable amount of time to deal with it. When characters have self-doubt, when characters have a mental block, it affects their performance. Characters can have an off day in battle, much like a boxer can go out there and he just doesn't have it that night. And you still gotta find a way to continue fighting, find a way to try to win, find a way to survive. Those are some of the most beautiful things about Vagabond to me. It feels real. The betrayals that take place in this manga, they hit on a different type of level because, as I mentioned earlier, you can feel what the character is feeling that's going through with the betrayal. You can feel and understand how this occurred and why it occurred, and how that he feels or she feels it was justified in the moment. And then you see these characters reflecting on these decisions in the future, learning, some growing, some remaining stagnant. And every time you just think back to, wow, this was a treat to read. The levels of progression in this series are, in my opinion, subtle. And I really like that because when you apply that to the real world, sure, change does occur, but change happens a lot slower in a real setting from my experience. Where at the end of the day, you are going to be who you are at your core. You can work to change, and you can always live in the now, move toward the future. But I like the fact that it's not just something where a switch gets turned. A switch gets turned here and I just automatically become this brand new character, brand new man. Because what you see in life is that no matter how hard you try to change, it's going to be a constant battle where you're going to revert back at times to old habits and old ways of thinking. You're gonna always have to continue to fight to change if you'd like to change. You're gonna always have those questions, that doubt. Are you on the right path? Are you doing what's right? Does this make sense? Is this stupid, or am I correct in following this path? I've never seen a manga illustrate that to such a level. The main character, Musashi, is a character that you can look up to in so many ways. The arcs don't feel contrived. They don't feel formulaic. Things go completely against the norm, where you're expecting one thing to take place, and it's not just like your expectations were subverted for the sake of it. It's like, wow, I really understand why this occurred this way, and it makes perfect sense because that's how life would be. It's not always going to be a situation where you go through levels where you take on the lackey, then the underboss, then the big boss, and perhaps even a greater threat than that. In life, everything is about the ebbs and flows. Things move at a constant rate. You never know what kind of situation you're gonna find yourself in. And honestly, it was just such a breath of fresh air to read something like that, where there's no formula to it. You're truly just on a journey. You have no idea what's gonna take place next. There's a backstory that comes out of nowhere, kind of. And I'll say that if I was to critique one thing about Vagabond, for me, a backstory is taking place, and it takes every part of about 50 chapters. And honestly, I did think the placement was a little bit odd. They did wrap it up with a nice bow later, and it all tied in nicely. But at times, I did feel a little bit bored with it, where I did want to get back to what was happening in the present day and what was pertinent to the story. But even in that time, you understand why it was important to see this, why the detail had so much care behind it. And at the end of the day, it really just felt like I was reading a story of real people with real problems, with real outcomes. And I love it. It's a story I'll never forget, and I'll definitely be rereading it at some point. You know, a manga is good when, as soon as you finish it, you're thinking about rereading it instantly. Thinking about going back and consuming it over and over again to see if you missed something, to appreciate it more, and to embark on the journey once again. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know what you guys think of Vagabond. If you have not read it, I would highly recommend it. As always, I appreciate it if you subscribe and drop a like on the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.